Crash! The sound of the teacup shattering against the cold hardwood floor wasn't nearly as cold as my son's eyes. Without a flicker of hesitation, he threw his cruel sentence at me like a stone. I sold your house to pay for my mother-in-law's vacation. You've got 1 day to pack your things. He thought I'd fall apart, that I'd beg for mercy to avoid being dumped in some rundown nursing home. But instead, I smiled and handed him an envelope. The moment he took it, I saw the color drain from his face. Because what he didn't know was that inside that thin piece of paper was a blade sharp enough to turn his luxurious cruise dream into a living nightmare. My name is Kimberly. I'm 68 years old, a widow living in Seattle. And I remember clearly, it was a rainy Tuesday. I sat in my wingback chair, a cup of Earl Grey tea cooling on the coaster, enjoying the silence. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then, the front door flew open. There was no knock, no turning of a key, just the aggressive intrusion of a man who believed he owned the place. Richard, my son, stood in the foyer. He was dripping wet, his expensive Italian suit dark with rain. He didn't wipe his feet. He walked straight onto the Persian rug, the one Arthur and I bought for our 30th anniversary, leaving muddy streaks in his wake. He looked terrible. His face was pale, eyes darting around the room as if he were appraising a liquidation sale. There was no, "Hello, Mom." No, "How are you?" He marched to the coffee table and slammed his hand down. He looked at me, not with love, but with a frantic, desperate annoyance. "I sold your house to pay for my mother-in-law's trip," he said. "You have 1 day to pack." The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. I blinked. I didn't stand up. I didn't scream. I just looked at him, trying to find the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. He wasn't there. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice steady. "You heard me." Richard tossed 2 brochures onto the table. They slid across the polished wood and stopped next to my tea. One was glossy and vibrant, the Mediterranean Royal Experience 70th Birthday Special. The other was thin and printed on cheap paper, Sunny Meadows Nursing Facility. My stomach churned. Everyone knew Sunny Meadows. It was a warehouse for the dying, a place that smelled of bleach and despair, where the staff was underpaid and the residents were forgotten. "Linda turns 70 next month," Richard said, his voice rushing now. "Jennifer and I promised her this trip. It's crucial for my business connections, Mom. You know how Linda is. She introduces me to investors." He gestured vaguely at the room. "And let's be real, this house is too big for you. Sunny Meadows has a bed open tomorrow. I pulled strings to get you in. It's efficient. You'll be safe." Safe. He wasn't doing this for my safety. He was doing it because he was broke. He was sacrificing his mother to fund a luxury cruise for a woman who treated him like a servant. He expected me to cry. He was waiting for the hysterics, the begging, the "how could you do this to me?" He was prepared to bully a frail old woman. But he forgot who raised him. Inside me, the shock dissolved instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The grief of losing my son, because the man standing here was surely a stranger, was shoved into a box and locked away. I entered survival mode. I took a sip of my tea. The china rattled ever so slightly against the saucer as I set it down. "You can't sell this house, Richard," I said softly. He rolled his eyes, exasperated. "Don't start, Mom. I have power of attorney. Dad signed it years ago. I handle the finances. I've already taken the deposit from an investment firm. They want a teardown. They pay cash. It's a done deal." He began to pace, his muddy shoes grinding into the rug. "I already spent the deposit on the plane tickets. If I don't deliver the house, I'm ruined. Jennifer will leave me. Linda will destroy my reputation." So, he was already in the hole. He had spent money he didn't have on a house he didn't own. I reached for the magazine rack beside my chair. Tucked between a catalog and a crossword book was a plain manila envelope. I had kept it there for 5 years, hoping I would never need it. I placed the envelope gently on the table, covering the picture of the cruise ship. "What is this?" Richard asked. "Read it." He snatched it up, ripping it open with shaking hands. He pulled out the stapled document. I watched his eyes scan the header. "The Kimberly and Arthur Living Trust. Irrevocable." Richard read the word aloud, his voice cracking. "Irrevocable," I confirmed. He looked up, the color draining from his face entirely. "That document means the house does not belong to me, Richard," I said, my tone as cool as the rain outside. "It belongs to the trust. And you are not the trustee. You have no authority to sell it. You have no authority to leverage it. And you certainly have no authority to evict me." "But the power of attorney," he stammered, "is useless regarding the trust assets." I cut him off. "Dad knew you had a spending problem, Richard. We protected the house from you. Specifically from you." Richard stared at the paper. He realized what this meant. He had sold a property he couldn't deliver. He had spent money that was now effectively stolen. "But I signed a contract," he whispered, terror replacing the arrogance in his eyes. "The investors. They aren't the kind of people you say oops to. Mom, you have to sign it over. If you don't, they'll come for me." He leaned over the table, pleading now. "Please. It's just a house. Linda needs this trip." I looked at him. I saw a man who would throw me into a pit to save his own ego. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. I picked up my book. "You have 5 seconds to get your muddy shoes out of my house." Before I call the police for trespassing, Richard stood frozen. He looked at the envelope, then at me. He realized the mother he thought he could bully was gone. He turned and ran out into the rain, the door slamming behind him. I sat in the silence. My hand trembled, just once. Then, I took another sip of tea. The war had begun. Richard didn't leave. Not really. He stormed out the front door, yes, but he didn't make it to his car. The heavy oak door slammed shut, but the latch didn't catch properly, a quirk of this old house that he would have known if he visited more than twice a year. Through the crack, the sound of the storm mixed with the frantic, high-pitched tone of his voice. He was pacing on the covered porch, pacing and shouting into his phone. I moved closer to the entryway. I didn't open the door. I stood in the shadows of my own hallway, pressing my back against the wall, and I listened. It wasn't polite, but politeness had left this house the moment my son tried to evict me. "She has a trust, Jen. A goddamn irrevocable trust." Richard was screaming, though he tried to keep his voice down, resulting in a harsh, strangled whisper. "No, I didn't know. Dad must have done it behind my back." There was a pause as the person on the other end, Jennifer, undoubtedly, spoke. I could imagine her tone, sharp, demanding, the voice of a woman who was used to getting what she wanted. "I can't just fix it," Richard snapped. "The investors are expecting the deed on Thursday. I already wired the 50 grand to the travel agency for your mother's cruise. It's non-refundable, Jen. First-class tickets. The penthouse suite, it's gone." I closed my eyes. $50,000. He had spent $50,000, money he clearly didn't have, on a vacation for Linda. I know. Richard's voice cracked, sounding like a desperate child. "Linda promised me the introduction to the Sato Group if I funded this trip. I need that contract, Jen. We're over-leveraged on the Mercer project. If I don't get that capital, the bank pulls the loan on our house. We lose everything." So, that was it. The curtain was pulled back. It wasn't just about a birthday, it was a transaction. Linda, my son's mother-in-law, was holding a business connection hostage in exchange for a luxury European tour. And my son, desperate to maintain the facade of a successful real estate mogul, had tried to liquidate my life to pay the ransom. I felt a wave of nausea, but it wasn't from fear, it was from a deep, hollow disappointment. Arthur had seen this coming. I remembered a night, shortly before his heart gave out, when we sat at the kitchen table reviewing our estate planning. "He wants the champagne life on a beer budget, Kim," Arthur had said, rubbing his tired eyes, "and he married a woman who thinks water should taste like wine. If we don't lock this house down, they'll pick your bones clean before the funeral flowers wilt." I had argued with him then. I wanted to trust my son. Arthur, in his wisdom, insisted on the trust. Thank God for Arthur. Outside, the conversation shifted. The desperation in Richard's voice turned into something darker. "I'll handle her," Richard said. The tone was ugly. "She's old, she's scared. I just need to apply more pressure. I'll make her sign a waiver to dissolve the trust. There are ways." The call ended. The heavy footsteps returned. I stepped away from the door just as Richard kicked it open. He stood there, wet and furious, the facade of the successful businessman completely gone. In his eyes, I saw a cornered animal. "You were listening," he accused, seeing me standing in the hallway. "I didn't have to try very hard," I replied calmly. "You were shouting about your debts to the entire neighborhood." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of rain and expensive cologne that couldn't mask the scent of fear. "You think you're clever with that piece of paper?" Richard sneered. "Let me tell you the reality, Mom. I am drowning. If I don't sell this house, I go bankrupt. Jennifer leaves me, and if Jennifer leaves me, she takes Leo. Leo, my grandson, 6 years old, with Arthur's unruly hair and my eyes. I hadn't seen him in 3 months because they were always too busy with piano lessons and soccer practice." "You wouldn't," I whispered. "Try me," Richard hissed. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "If you don't sign that waiver, if you don't help me fix this mess by tomorrow morning, you will never see your grandson again. No visits, no FaceTime. I will tell him his grandmother died. I will erase you from his life." The brutality of it took my breath away. He wasn't just threatening my home anymore, he was holding my lineage hostage. He knew Leo was the only soft spot I had left. He expected me to crumble. He expected me to grab his arm and beg, "No, not Leo, take the house, take everything." But looking at him, seeing the cruelty etched into the lines of his face, something inside me shifted. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was terrorism. And you do not negotiate with terrorists. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was quiet, terrifyingly so. Richard blinked, confused by my lack of hysteria. "You are a grown man, Richard," I said, straightening my back. "You made your choices. You spent money you didn't have to impress a woman who doesn't respect you and a mother-in-law who uses you. Do not bring my grandson into your filth." "It's not a threat, it's a promise," he yelled, backing away toward the door. "You're forcing me to do this. You're the one destroying this family." "I am protecting what your father built," I said. "Go home to your wife, Richard. Tell her the Bank of Mom is closed. You'll regret this," he screamed. "Don't expect us at Christmas. Don't expect us ever." He turned and ran into the rain. This time, he made it to his car. The engine of his leased Audi roared to life, and he peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. I watched his taillights disappear into the gloom. "You made me do this." The coward's anthem. I locked the front door. Then I engaged the deadbolt. My hands were shaking now, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline. I walked to the kitchen, not to make tea, but to the landline phone mounted on the wall. I didn't trust my cell phone. Jennifer was on my family plan, and I wouldn't put it past them to track my calls. I dialed a number I had memorized but never hoped to use. It rang twice. Joyce Hamilton, attorney at law. Her voice was professional, crisp, an anchor in the storm. "Joyce," I said, leaning my forehead against the cool kitchen wall. "It's Kimberly. You were right. He tried to sell the house." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Did he threaten you?" "Yes," I said, "he threatened to cut me off from my grandson. And, Joyce, he took a deposit from a private investment firm. He's already spent the money." "Fraud," Joyce said. "And elder abuse. Kimberly, listen to me. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is a criminal matter. Are you safe right now?" "He's gone," I said. "But he'll be back. He said he has ways to make me sign." "Lock your doors. Do not let anyone in, not even Jennifer," Joyce instructed. "I'm drafting an emergency injunction tonight. We're going to freeze everything." "Kimberly?" "Yes?" "You need to be prepared," she said softly. "If we do this, if we expose his debts and the fraud, Richard could go to prison." I looked out the kitchen window into the dark, rainy night. I thought about the little boy I used to hold, the one who cried when he scraped his knee. Then I thought about the man who looked me in the eye and threatened to tell my grandson I was dead. "He didn't care if I died in a nursing home, Joyce," I said, my voice hardening. "Do what you have to do." I hung up the phone. The house was silent again, but it felt different. It was no longer just a home, it was a fortress. And I was the commander. The aggression stopped as quickly as the rain. By Thursday morning, the shouting was replaced by casseroles. Richard and Jennifer didn't storm my gates anymore. They besieged me with kindness. It was a terrifying, suffocating kind of love. They called 3 times a day. Jennifer stopped by every evening, her arms full of Tupperware and store-bought flowers, her smile plastered on like a decal. "We just worry about you, Mom," she would chirp, placing a lasagna on the counter. "Richard feels terrible about Tuesday. Ideally, we just want what's best for you." I didn't buy it. Not for a second. The sudden pivot from extortion to concern wasn't an apology. It was a strategy. It started with small things, objects migrating around the house. My reading glasses, which I always leave on the nightstand, appeared in the refrigerator next to the milk. The spare keys to the back door vanished from their hook and turned up in the garbage disposal. At first, a tiny, insidious voice whispered in my ear, "Are you slipping, Kimberly? Is it age?" But then came the incident with the stove. Jennifer was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea. I was in the living room, folding laundry. I heard the whistle of the kettle, then the click of the burner turning off. 10 minutes later, Jennifer walked into the living room, sniffing the air theatrically. "Mom? Do you smell gas?" She rushed back into the kitchen. "Oh my God! Mom! You left the burner on." The flame was out, but the gas was running full blast. She ran back to me, eyes wide with performative panic. I turned it off. "But, Jesus, Mom, you could have blown us up. Did you forget to check it after you made your toast?" I looked at her. I hadn't made toast. I hadn't stepped foot in the kitchen for an hour. "I didn't use the stove, Jennifer," I said calmly. "You must have," she insisted, her voice dripping with pity. "I didn't touch that burner." "Oh, Mom." Richard was right to be worried. This is how it starts. First the keys, now the gas. I saw the glint in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was satisfaction. The next day, I was pruning the hydrangeas in the front yard when Mrs. Gable, my neighbor of 20 years, waved from her porch. She walked over to the fence, her expression guarded. "Kimberly, dear," she started, leaning in. "Jennifer told me about the episodes. If you ever need me to check on you, or if you get confused about where you are, just holler, okay?" "Episodes?" I asked, gripping the garden shears. "You know," Mrs. Gable lowered her voice. "The dementia. She said you were wandering at night. That you were becoming a danger to yourself." My blood ran cold. They were planting seeds. They were building a narrative in the community, creating witnesses for a crime that hadn't happened. If I fought back now, if I screamed that they were liars, I would just look like the confused, paranoid old woman they claimed I was. I smiled at Mrs. Gable. A tight, polite smile. "Jennifer tends to exaggerate." "I'm perfectly fine, Martha. But thank you." I walked back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands were trembling, not from frailty, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could burn the house down. They were trying to gaslight me. They wanted to make me doubt my own mind, so they could declare me incompetent. If I was incompetent, the power of attorney would reactivate. The trust would be vulnerable. That evening, Jennifer came over again. She brought a blueberry pie. While she was in the kitchen tidying up, which I knew meant rearranging my cutlery to confuse me, she left her oversized designer handbag on the dining chair. It was unzipped. I sat at the head of the table, sipping water, watching her through the open archway. She was humming, a happy little tune. "I'm just going to use the restroom, Jen," I announced. "Okay, Mom. Watch your step," she called back. I walked down the hall, waited 5 seconds, and doubled back on silent feet. I moved to the dining chair. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't want to do this. I was raised to respect privacy. But I was in a war zone now. I peered into the bag. A wallet, lipstick, car keys, and there, tucked into a side pocket, was a familiar orange plastic bottle. I reached in and pulled it out. Lisinopril, 10 milligrams, prescribed to Kimberly Vance, my blood pressure medication. I had spent 2 hours looking for this bottle this morning. I had checked the medicine cabinet, the bedside table, even the trash, convinced I had mislaid it. Missing 3 doses of this could send me to the emergency room with a hypertensive crisis. A stroke. And that's exactly what they wanted. A medical event, a hospitalization, proof that Mom couldn't take care of herself. I stared at the bottle in my hand. It wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. They were willing to risk my life to get their hands on the house. I heard the kitchen faucet turn off. Jennifer was coming back. Panic flared, but I shoved it down. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If I confronted her, she would deny it. She would say I put it there. She would say I was paranoid. I slipped the bottle into the pocket of my cardigan just as Jennifer walked into the room. "All done," she beamed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "The kitchen is spotless. You know, Mom, Maybe we should hire a nurse, just for a few hours a day. Someone to manage your meds. Richard says you've been forgetting to take them. I looked at her. I touched the hard plastic cylinder in my pocket. The evidence. Maybe, I said, forcing my voice to sound tired, defeated. Maybe you're right, Jennifer. I do feel cloudy lately. Her smile widened. It was predatory. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Get some rest. She grabbed her bag, oblivious to what was missing, and left. As soon as her car pulled away, the defeated old woman vanished. I stood up straight. I walked to the front door and locked it. Then I went to the hallway closet. I pushed aside the winter coats and the vacuum cleaner until I reached the back panel. There, covered in a layer of dust, was a small, unassuming metal box mounted to the wall. Arthur was a structural engineer, but his hobby was electronics. He loved gadgets. Before he died, he had wired the entire house. He called it his ghost system. He had installed cameras in the smoke detectors, microphones in the alarm sensors, all hardwired to a local server in the basement. He didn't trust the cloud, and he didn't trust big tech companies. If anyone ever tries to break in, Kim, he had told me, you'll have them in 4K resolution. Richard knew about the system years ago, but he thought it was just a burglar alarm. He thought it was obsolete. He didn't know Arthur and I had upgraded the hard drives right before he passed. I opened the panel and punched in the code, 1984. The year Richard was born. The irony wasn't lost on me. A green light flickered to life. The hum of the server kicked in from the floorboards below. I pulled out my tablet and connected to the local network. The screen filled with a grid of live feeds, the kitchen, the living room, the dining room where Jennifer had left her bag. I rewound the footage. There it was. 6:15 p.m. Jennifer enters the kitchen. She looks over her shoulder. She reaches up and turns the gas dial. She waits. Then she fans the air with her hand to spread the smell. I skipped forward. 7 p.m. The dining room. Jennifer opens her purse. She takes my pill bottle off the sideboard, where I had definitely left it, and drops it into her bag. I pressed save. I wasn't the confused old lady they wanted me to be. I wasn't the victim. I was the prosecution. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the frantic pounding of my son, nor the hesitant scratch of a neighbor. It was a firm, entitled two-note chime. I checked the monitor on my tablet. A silver Mercedes-Benz was parked in my driveway, taking up 2 spaces. Standing on my porch, checking her reflection in the glass of the storm door, was Linda, my son's mother-in-law. She was dressed for a luncheon at the country club, a cream-colored Chanel suit that cost more than my car, oversized sunglasses, and a silk scarf tied effortlessly around her neck. She looked like money. Specifically, my money. I opened the door. "Kimberly!" Linda exclaimed, throwing her arms open as if we were long-lost sisters. She leaned in for an air kiss, ensuring her cheek didn't actually touch mine. A cloud of heavy floral perfume assaulted my nose. "Oh, look at you, you look rested." The word rested was doing a lot of heavy lifting. In Linda's vocabulary, it usually meant old. "Hello, Linda," I said, stepping aside. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Oh, please. Do I need a reason to check on family?" She breezed past me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She stopped in the center of the living room and did a slow, 360-degree turn. Her eyes scanned the crown molding, the fireplace, the curtains. It wasn't admiration, it was an appraisal. My, she murmured. "This place is just so quaint. It really takes one back to the 90s, doesn't it? It must be exhausting to keep all this dust settled. We call it character." "Linda," I said, closing the door. "Can I offer you some tea?" "Just hot water with lemon, dear. I'm detoxing before the trip. Gotta fit into those evening gowns." She winked at me, a gesture that felt as genuine as a $3 bill. We sat in the living room. I served her water in my best china, placing the cup down with deliberate precision. Linda crossed her legs, smoothing her skirt. "So," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Jennifer tells me you've been having a rough go of it. Forgetting things? Leaving the gas on?" She teched, shaking her head. "It's tragic, really. But it happens to the best of us. My own aunt went that way. One day she was fine, the next she was trying to mail a cat." I took a sip of my Earl Grey. "I am perfectly healthy, Linda." My memory is sharp. Of course, of course. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. That's what they all say in the beginning. Denial is part of the disease. But Kimberly, we have to be practical. Richard is worried sick. He's losing sleep. Is it really fair to be such a burden on the children? There it was. The guilt card, played by a woman who had never lifted a finger for anyone in her life. Richard seems more worried about his finances than my health, I said dryly. Linda's smile tightened at the edges. Well, money is tight for everyone, isn't it? But that's not the point. The point is quality of life. Jennifer mentioned Sunny Meadows. I hear it's charming. Very social. You could play bingo, make friends your own age. I have friends, I countered. And I have a home. Linda sighed, setting her cup down. The mask slipped, just a fraction. Her eyes grew cold. Look, let's be adults here, she said, her tone sharpening. You're sitting on a gold mine, Kimberly. This house? In this market. It's wasteful for one person to hoard all this equity. Richard has big plans. We have big plans. That cruise isn't just a vacation. It's a networking opportunity that could set the family up for life. She leaned forward, invading my personal space. You've had your time. She continued. Arthur is gone. You're just existing here. Why not let the money go where it can actually be useful? Why be so selfish? Selfish. The woman who demanded a $50,000 birthday cruise was calling me selfish for wanting to sleep in my own bed. I casually adjusted the cuff of my blouse, tapping the screen of my smartwatch. The red recording icon pulsed silently. So, you're admitting it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You know Richard is trying to sell my house to pay for your trip? Linda laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Oh, honey, everybody knows. Richard told me the sale is practically done. He said you were being difficult, but that he'd handle it. He said the cash would be in the account by Friday. She looked around the room again with a sneer. Honestly, why you're fighting it is beyond me. Duly considering the state of this place, you should be grateful someone wants to buy it. It's going to be a teardown anyway. Why stress about maintaining it? It's practically liquid cash already. Gotcha. Liquid cash, I repeated. Thank you for clarifying, Linda. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch and stood up abruptly. Well, I've said my piece. Think about it, Kimberly. Don't be the anchor dragging your son down. Nobody likes a stubborn old woman. She walked to the door, not waiting for me to escort her. I'll see you at the farewell dinner. Oh, wait. Never mind. She chuckled at her own cruelty and let herself out. I watched the Mercedes back out of the driveway. I looked down at my wrist and pressed stop recording. The file saved instantly to the cloud. Linda had just confirmed conspiracy and premeditation. She confirmed that the sale was the primary motive, not my health. But my victory was short-lived. 10 minutes later, before I could even finish my tea, the front door opened again. This time, there was no knocking. Richard and Jennifer walked in. They didn't remove their shoes. They didn't say hello. The air in the room changed instantly. It grew heavy, charged with a frantic, dangerous energy. Richard looked disheveled. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. Jennifer looked pale, her hands twitching by her sides. We saw Mom's car leave, Richard said, his voice devoid of emotion. She called me. She said you were rude to her. She said you were talking nonsense. She said you were confused, Jennifer added, closing the door and locking it. She slid the deadbolt home with a loud clack. I was perfectly clear, I said, standing up. And I think it's time for you both to leave. We can't do that, Mom, Richard said. He walked toward me. The investors are pushing. The deadline is tomorrow. We tried the nice way. We tried the casseroles. We tried the logic. And now? I asked, backing up slightly until my legs hit the sofa. Now we have to protect you from yourself, Jennifer said. She was walking toward the kitchen, but her eyes were fixed on me. I'm going to call 911, Richard. You know what to do. I froze. 911? For what? Richard lunged. He didn't hit me. He wasn't that brave. Instead, he grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from the mantelpiece, a vase Arthur had brought back from Italy, and smashed it onto the floor. Crash! Shards of pottery exploded across the room. Then he grabbed the side table and overturned it. Books and the lamp went flying. "Mom!" Richard shouted, but he was shouting for an audience that wasn't there yet. "Mom, calm down. Put the knife down. What are you doing?" I whispered, horrified. Jennifer was already on her phone, her voice pitching up into a hysterical scream. 911? "Please, help, it's my mother-in-law. She's having a psychotic break. She's destroying the house." She fell. "Oh God!" She fell down the stairs. Richard looked at me. There were tears in his eyes, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "I'm sorry, Mom," he muttered, "but you left me no choice." He moved toward me, his hands outstretched. He wasn't going to help me up. He was going to make sure the scene matched the phone call. He was going to guide me to the floor forcefully. "It's just a 72-hour hold," he hissed, as he grabbed my arm. "Just enough time for me to sign the papers while you're incapacitated. Don't fight it." I looked at the shards of the Italian vase on the floor. I looked at my son, who was gripping my arm tight enough to bruise. The gaslighting was over. The assault had begun. The sirens weren't loud. Inside the ambulance, they were just a dull, rhythmic thrum, vibrating through the gurney. I was strapped down. 2 belts across my chest, 1 across my legs. The paramedic called it standard protocol for a patient exhibiting agitation and delirium. I called it what it was: captivity. I stared at the flickering lights on the ceiling. My arm throbbed where Richard had grabbed me. My heart ached in a place medicine couldn't reach. An hour ago, I was drinking tea. Now, I was case number 409 at County General. The system is a terrifying machine when it turns against you. When the police arrived, they didn't see a retired librarian being assaulted. They saw a well-dressed, crying son and a concerned daughter-in-law sweeping up broken glass. "She doesn't know where she is," Richard had told the officer, his voice trembling with practiced grief. "She thinks we're stealing from her. It's the dementia, it's getting violent." By the time I tried to speak, the narrative was set. Paranoia, confusion, danger to self. At the hospital, they took everything. My clothes were stripped away, replaced by a paper-thin gown. My smartwatch, with the recording of Linda, was bagged and tagged. My phone was confiscated. "For your safety, Mrs. Vance," the nurse said, locking my life away in a plastic bin. I was placed in a room with beige walls and a heavy door that locked from the outside. A single safety glass window looked out onto a brick wall. I sat on the edge of the bed, shivering. It wasn't just the air conditioning. It was the realization of my status. In the state of Washington, an emergency hold gives doctors 72 hours to evaluate a patient. For 3 days, I was legally a ghost. I had no rights, I had no voice, and Richard had 3 days to file for emergency guardianship. Time blurred. I didn't sleep. I just waited. Then, the lock clicked. I expected a doctor. Instead, Richard walked in. He was alone. He had used his status as next of kin to bypass visiting hours. He looked calm now. The frantic energy from the house was gone, replaced by a smooth, regretful demeanor. He pulled a plastic chair close to the bed, sitting just out of arm's reach. "Mom," he said softly. I didn't answer. I just watched him. "I didn't want it to be like this," he whispered. "I hate seeing you in here. It smells like bleach. It's depressing." "Then sign the release," I rasped. He shook his head. "I can't. The doctors agree with me. They saw the police report. They think you're having a breakdown." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. He placed it on the mattress between us, along with a pen. "But I can fix it," he said. "I can get you out right now. If I assume guardianship, they'll release you into my custody. We can go home." I looked at the paper. Emergency guardianship petition, power of attorney reinstatement. "It just gives me control over the assets so I can handle the investors," Richard explained, his voice sounding reasonable, almost kind. "Once the house is sold, I'll get you a nice suite at Sunny Meadows. A private room." He leaned in, his eyes pleading. "Just sign it, Mom. End this. If you don't, the state takes over. They'll declare you incompetent anyway. You'll rot in here for weeks while the courts decide where to shove you." The threat was wrapped in velvet, but it was a dagger. Sign or die in prison. I looked at the pen. It would be so easy. Just a signature, and the fear would stop. I could sleep in a real bed. All I had to do was give him everything Arthur and I had built. I looked at my son. I realized he truly believed he was being merciful. He didn't see a mother, he saw an obstacle to be managed. "You are so small, Richard," I said. His face hardened. "I'm trying to help you." "You are trying to rob me," I said. "And you are using the law as a crowbar." "Fine," he spat, standing up. "Stay here. The hearing is in 3 days. By then, the judge will grant me custody anyway. You're just delaying the inevitable." He turned to leave. He reached for the handle. The door swung open before he could touch it. A woman stood in the doorway. Tall, silver hair in a severe bun. A navy blazer that looked like armor. Joyce Hamilton. My attorney. Behind her stood a flustered hospital administrator and a nervous security guard. "Mr. Vance?" Joyce asked. Her voice cut through the sterile air like a scalpel. Richard froze. "Who are you?" "I am Kimberly Vance's legal counsel," Joyce said, stepping into the room and blocking his exit. She didn't look at him. She looked at the administrator. "Dr. Evans, my client has been detained under false pretenses. I have an injunction here signed by Judge Miller blocking any transfer of guardianship or assets." She turned to me, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "Hello, Kimberly. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic." She can't hire a lawyer," Richard stammered, backing away. "She's incapacitated." "She hired me 10 years ago," Joyce said, finally pinning Richard with a look of pure disdain. "And she activated her legal retainer last night. I have the call log." She walked to the bed and picked up the document Richard had left. She glanced at it and let out a dry, sharp laugh. "Coercion of a detained patient," she noted. "We'll add that to the file." "I was just visiting," Richard said, his face draining of color. "You are leaving," Joyce commanded. She pointed to the door. "And if you come within 500 feet of this hospital or my client's home before the hearing, I will have you arrested for harassment and witness tampering." Richard looked at the security guard. The guard didn't move. The power had shifted. Richard glared at me one last time. "This isn't over, Mom." "It will be soon," I said. He stormed out, brushing past Joyce. The door closed, shutting out his toxic energy. Joyce pulled the chair closer and sat down. She took my hand. Her skin was warm. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "I'm scared, Joyce. I'm in a mental ward. They took my clothes." "I know," she said firmly. "But you're not alone. I've filed a motion for an independent evaluation. We're getting you out of here." She opened her briefcase. "The hearing is set for Friday morning. Richard thinks this is a simple guardianship formality. He thinks he's walking into a rubber stamp session." She smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "He has no idea," she said, "that he's walking into a slaughter." I looked at the brick wall outside the window. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a bunker. And I had just received reinforcements. "Let's get to work," I said. I was released on a technicality. Judge Miller had granted a temporary release order pending the hearing, largely thanks to Joyce's aggressive maneuvering. But I wasn't truly free. I was released into the custody of a court-appointed monitor, a quiet woman named Sarah who sat in my living room reading a Kindle while Joyce and I retreated to the study. The house felt violated. The broken pottery had been swept away, but the ghost of Richard's violence still hung in the air. "We have 12 hours, Kimberly," Joyce said, locking the study door. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She opened her laptop and connected an external hard drive. "Richard's lawyer filed the petition this morning. They have a statement from a Dr. Eris claiming you are suffering from acute paranoia and rapid-onset dementia. They are moving for permanent conservatorship." "Dr. Eris," I said, the name tasting sour. "The man who spent 5 minutes with me and asked if I knew who the president was." "He's a hired gun," Joyce dismissed him. "We need something stronger than his opinion. We need facts." I walked to the bookshelf and pulled the false volume of War and Peace. Behind it lay the master controls for Arthur's ghost system. I pulled the server cable and plugged it directly into Joyce's machine. "Richard thinks this is just a burglar alarm," I said, my voice steady. He forgot his father was paranoid about internal threats, not just external ones. We initiated the transfer. Gigabytes of data flooded onto the screen. The system had been recording on a continuous loop, motion-activated, high definition, with audio enhancement. "Let's start with the kitchen," I said. "Tuesday, 6 p.m. Joyce clicked the file. On the screen, grainy but unmistakable, Jennifer walked into the frame. The timestamp read 6:14 p.m. We watched in silence as she looked over her shoulder, checking the hallway. Then, she reached out. Her hand hovered over the gas dial. She twisted it. Not all the way, just enough to break the seal and let the gas hiss. She stood there for a moment, wafting the air toward the hallway with her hand, setting the stage. Then she smiled. A small, self-satisfied smirk that chilled me to the bone. Attempted harm, Joyce murmured, typing furiously. Endangerment of a vulnerable adult. That's a felony. Keep watching, I said. Go to Wednesday. The hallway. Joyce pulled up the next file. This was the one that broke my heart. It was Richard. He was standing alone in the foyer, staring into the mirror. He wasn't on the phone. He was talking to himself. She's lost it, officer, Richard said to his reflection. Then he shook his head. No, too aggressive, try again. He took a breath, rubbing his eyes to make them red. His face crumpled into a mask of anguish. My mother. She just doesn't know who we are anymore. She's violent. I'm so scared for her. He stopped. He checked his expression in the glass. He adjusted his tie. Perfect. I stared at the screen. My son. The boy I had nursed through fevers, the man I had helped with his college applications. He wasn't just desperate, he was calculating. He had rehearsed my destruction like an actor preparing for a role. It was premeditated, I whispered. The pain was a physical weight in my chest, heavy and cold. He planned the 911 call. This is the golden ticket, Joyce said, her eyes gleaming with predatory focus. This proves the emergency call was a staged event. It invalidates the entire premise of the guardianship. But we weren't done. I did some digging into Richard's financials, Joyce said, shifting gears. She pulled a stack of papers from her briefcase. You knew he was in debt. You didn't know who he owed. She slid a spreadsheet across the desk. The numbers were staggering, red ink everywhere. But it was the names of the creditors that stood out. They weren't banks. They were LLCs registered in places like the Cayman Islands and Delaware, shell companies known for high-risk lending. He owes $200,000 to a private equity group that functions as a loan shark operation, Joyce explained. They don't garnish wages, Kimberly. They break legs. That's why he's so desperate. He's not just trying to impress Linda. He's trying to stay alive. He sold my house to pay off the mob, I said. And to fund the cruise, Joyce added. I subpoenaed the travel agency. The $50,000 for Linda's suite? It came from the deposit he took on your house. He misappropriated funds he didn't legally control. And Linda? I asked. Does she know? Oh, she knows. Joyce minimized the video player and opened a captured image file. The smart home system also logs keystrokes on devices connected to the guest Wi-Fi. Jennifer logged into her email on her iPad while she was in your kitchen. The screen showed a screenshot of an outgoing email. From Jen Vansat. Subject: almost there. Don't worry, Mom. The old hag is almost in the facility. Richard called 911 like we planned. The 72-hour hold buys us enough time to get the power of attorney pushed through. The funds should hit your account before you board the ship. Pack your bags. The old hag. I stared at the words. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is a hot emotion. This was something else. This was ice. This was the absolute, final severance of the maternal bond. She called me a hag, I said flatly, and she admitted to the conspiracy. They are done, Joyce said, leaning back in her chair. With this evidence, we don't just win the guardianship hearing. We have grounds for criminal prosecution, fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment, elder abuse. She looked at me. Kimberly, I need you to be sure. Once we present this in court tomorrow, there is no going back. Richard will lose his license. He might go to prison. His life as he knows it will be over. I looked at the monitor. I looked at the image of Richard practicing his fake tears. I thought about the fear I felt in that hospital room, stripped of my dignity, wondering if I would die alone in a place that smelled of bleach. They had made their choice. They chose greed over family. They chose a cruise over my life. He made his bed, I said, closing the laptop. Now he can sleep in it. Good, Joyce said. She began packing up the drives. Get some sleep. You have a big performance tomorrow. "I won't be performing," I said. "I'll be testifying." Joyce left. I sat in the study for a long time, listening to the rain start up again against the window. The house was quiet. The ghosts were still here, but they didn't scare me anymore. Tomorrow, we would go to court. Richard and Jennifer would walk in wearing their expensive suits, flanked by their paid-off doctor, confident that they had crushed the weak, confused old woman. They thought they were attending a funeral for my freedom. They didn't know they were walking into an execution. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood. It was a smell designed to intimidate, to remind you that you were small and the law was big. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Joyce, my hands folded in my lap, watching the performance of a lifetime. Richard and Jennifer sat across the aisle. They were dressed in somber colors, navy blue and charcoal gray, chosen specifically to evoke sympathy. Richard had dark circles under his eyes, likely real given his financial state, but he played them up as the ravages of concern. Jennifer dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue every time the judge looked her way. In the back row, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, sat Linda. She looked like a vulture waiting to see if the carcass was worth picking. Judge Miller, a stern man with a receding hairline and a reputation for impatience, looked over his glasses at my son. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer began, his voice dripping with faux compassion. "This is not a case we bring lightly. Mr. Vance loves his mother deeply. It breaks his heart to see her in this state of decline. But the incident with the broken glass, the confusion about the gas stove, these are clear indicators of rapid-onset dementia. Mrs. Vance is a danger to herself. We are simply asking for the legal authority to keep her safe." Richard nodded, letting out a shaky breath. "We just want Mom safe," he whispered, loud enough for the stenographer to catch. Then came their star witness, Dr. Aris. He walked to the stand with the confidence of a man whose opinion had been bought and paid for. He testified that my paranoia regarding the house sale was a classic symptom of cognitive decline. He claimed my refusal to sign the papers was not a legal strategy, but a sign of executive function failure. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Aris concluded, smoothing his tie, "Mrs. Vance lacks the capacity to manage her own affairs. She requires immediate, 24-hour supervision in a secure facility." I saw Judge Miller nodding slowly. He was looking at me with pity. To him, I was just another tragic statistic. An old woman whose mind had betrayed her, whose loving children were trying to pick up the pieces. The narrative was working. The trap was closing. Joyce leaned over to me. "Ready?" "End them," I said softly. Joyce stood up. She didn't approach the podium. She didn't offer a rebuttal speech. She simply connected her laptop to the courtroom's AV system. "Your Honor," Joyce said, her voice cutting through the heavy air. "The petitioner claims his mother is paranoid. He claims her belief that he is plotting against her is a delusion. We would like to present Exhibit A, data extracted from the Vance residence smart home system, dated this past Wednesday." Richard's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Relevance? It goes to the heart of the petitioner's credibility regarding the emergency event," Joyce countered smoothly. The judge waved his hand. "Overruled. Play it." The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom fell silent as the video played. It was the hallway footage, Richard, standing alone in front of the mirror. "She's lost it, officer," the Richard on the screen practiced, his voice calm and calculating. He shook his head. "No, too aggressive. Try again." We watched him adjust his tie. We watched him rub his eyes to simulate crying. We watched him twist his face into a mask of fake grief. "My mother. She just doesn't know who we are anymore." A gasp rippled through the gallery. In the real courtroom, Richard went pale. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "He rehearsed it," Judge Miller murmured, his eyes narrowing. "There is more, Your Honor," Joyce said. "Exhibit B. The kitchen." The video shifted. Jennifer appeared. We watched her check the hallway. We watched her deliberately reach out and twist the gas dial open without lighting the burner. We watched the satisfied smirk on her face as she waved the gas into the room, setting a lethal trap for her own mother-in-law. Jennifer let out a small, strangled sound. She looked at Richard, then at her lawyer, but there was nowhere to hide. The screen was 10 feet tall. Her malice was magnified for everyone to see. And finally, Joyce continued, relentless, Exhibit C, an email correspondence between Mrs. Jennifer Vance and her mother, Mrs. Linda Sterling, dated the same day. The text appeared on the screen, highlighted in yellow. "Don't worry, Mom. The old hag is almost in the facility. Richard called 911 like we planned. The funds should hit your account before you board the ship." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, where all the air had been sucked out by the sheer weight of the truth. Judge Miller wasn't nodding anymore. He was reading the screen, his face turning a shade of red that signaled a coming storm. He looked from the screen to Richard, then to Jennifer, and finally to Dr. Eris, who was suddenly very interested in his own shoes. This is taken out of context," Richard stammered, standing up. "Judge, please, she's manipulating the footage. Sit down, Mr. Vance." Judge Miller barked. The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. "Unless you want to be held in contempt this second, you will sit down and be quiet." Richard collapsed back into his chair. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Joyce turned to me. "Mrs. Vance? Would you like to address the court?" I stood up. My legs felt strong. The trembling I had felt in the hospital was gone. I walked to the front of the room, not to the witness stand, but to the center of the floor. I looked at the judge, then I turned and looked directly at my son. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was looking at the table, at his hands, anywhere but at the mother he had tried to destroy. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and steady. "For 30 years, I raised this man. I taught him to tie his shoes. I taught him right from wrong, or at least, I thought I did." I paused, letting the weight of the memory settle. "I sat in that hospital room for 3 days," I continued. "Stripped of my clothes, stripped of my dignity, wondering if I was indeed going crazy. Because that is what betrayal does to you. It makes you question your own reality." But I realized something in that silence. I took a step closer to Richard's table. I realized that I am not the one who is sick. I am not the one who is lost. I looked at Jennifer, who was weeping silently, real tears this time, tears of fear. "You wanted my house," I said to them. "You wanted my money. You thought that because I am old, I am disposable. You thought I would be easy to discard, like furniture you've outgrown." I turned back to the judge. "I may be old, Your Honor, but I am not blind. And I would rather be lonely in my sanity than live in the falsehood of family affection. I do not want their love," I declared, my voice ringing off the mahogany walls. "Because their love comes with a price tag I am no longer willing to pay. I want my life back. And I want justice." I sat down. Judge Miller stared at me for a long moment. There was respect in his eyes now. He shuffled the papers on his bench, stacking Dr. Eris's report to the side as if it were trash. He looked at Richard's lawyer. "Counselor, do you have any defense for the attempted gas poisoning or the premeditated fraud we just witnessed?" The lawyer, realizing his career was flashing before his eyes, simply shook his head. "No, Your Honor." "Very well." Judge Miller leaned forward. His voice was low and dangerous. "The petition for emergency guardianship is denied with prejudice. The temporary restraining order against Mrs. Vance is vacated immediately." He wasn't done. He turned his gaze to Richard. "Mr. Vance, in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many family disputes, but I have rarely seen such a calculated, malicious attempt to exploit the legal system to harm a vulnerable parent. You didn't just try to take her house. You tried to take her freedom. You tried to gaslight this court." The judge picked up a pen and signed an order furiously. "I am referring this entire file, including the video evidence and financial records provided by the defense, to the district attorney's office. I am recommending an immediate investigation into elder abuse, insurance fraud, and attempted assault." He banged the gavel. "This court is adjourned. Bailiffs, please ensure Mrs. Vance is escorted safely to her vehicle." The sound of the gavel was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "No," Jennifer shrieked. "Richard, do something." "We can't." "The license." Richard didn't move. He sat frozen, staring at the empty screen where his rehearsal had played. He was watching his future disintegrate. I stood up and gathered my purse. Joyce gave me a rare, beaming smile and squeezed my shoulder. As we turned to leave, I looked toward the back of the courtroom. The seat was empty. Linda was gone. The moment the judge mentioned the district attorney, she had slipped out the side door. She hadn't stayed to comfort her daughter. She hadn't stayed to help her son-in-law. The ship was sinking, and the rat had been the first to flee. I walked down the center aisle. I passed Richard. He looked up at me, his eyes wet, his face a mask of total defeat. "Mom," he croaked. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past him as if he were a stranger. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the gray Seattle clouds. The air smelled of wet pavement and freedom. "We did it," Joyce said, taking a deep breath. "No," I corrected her, looking back at the courthouse. "We didn't just do it. We finished it." Victory didn't taste sweet. It didn't taste like champagne or revenge. It tasted like cold coffee left out on the counter, bitter, flat, and leaving a bad aftertaste in the back of your throat. In the movies, when the hero wins in court, the credits roll over a montage of smiling faces and sunny days. In real life, the gavel bangs, and you just go home to an empty house that feels too big and too quiet. The fallout came fast. It was like watching a controlled demolition. Once the foundational support, my silence, was removed, the entire structure of Richard's life imploded. Joyce kept me updated. She called it legal housekeeping, but I knew she was trying to give me closure. Richard was terminated on Monday, she told me over the phone, her voice professional but softened by pity. The firm cited a breach of their morality clause. When the district attorney opened the investigation into fraud, the company had to cut ties to protect their reputation. No severance, and Jennifer, the Washington State Department of Licensing doesn't take kindly to real estate agents who use their skills to defraud the elderly. Her license was suspended pending the investigation, which effectively ended her career. In this town, your reputation is your currency. She was bankrupt in more ways than one. But the cruelest blow came from the person who started it all. Linda didn't go on her cruise. The Mediterranean royal experience sailed without her. She canceled the trip the day after the hearing, citing unforeseen family health issues to her social circle. She wasn't sick, of course. She was allergic to scandal. Word got back to me through Mrs. Gable next door. News travels faster over garden fences than it does on the internet, that Linda had banned Richard and Jennifer from her home. She told everyone that she had been duped by her son-in-law, that she had no idea about his financial schemes. She cut them off. The rats were not only fleeing the ship, they were eating each other. I spent my days in the garden, pruning the roses Arthur had planted. I tried to feel vindicated. I tried to tell myself that justice had been served. But mostly, I just felt a deep, heavy sadness. A mother never wants to be right about her child's failure. 3 weeks after the trial, the separation happened. With no income, burying themselves in legal fees, and the bank foreclosing on their overpriced home, the stress cracked the thin veneer of Richard and Jennifer's marriage. Jennifer moved back in with a friend. Linda wouldn't take her. Richard was sleeping on a coworker's couch. I watched all this from a distance. I didn't call. I didn't offer a loan. That was the hardest part. The instinct to fix it, to open my checkbook and make the pain go away, was a physical ache in my chest. But I knew if I saved him now, I would be robbing him of the only thing that could actually save him. The consequences of his own actions. Then came the Tuesday night. It was raining again. It seems fitting that the end of the story would mirror the beginning. I was in bed, reading, when the pounding started. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a heavy, uncoordinated beating against the front door. I grabbed my robe and checked the iPad on my nightstand. The camera feed showed a figure slumped against the doorframe. Richard. He was soaking wet. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit this time. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, and he looked 20 years older than he had a month ago. He was holding a bottle wrapped in a paper bag. I went downstairs. I didn't turn on the porch light. I stood on the other side of the heavy oak door, my hand resting on the deadbolt. I didn't unlock it. "Mom," he slurred. "I know you're in there." I saw the light. His voice was thick with whiskey and self-pity. "Go away, Richard," I said, leaning close to the wood. "You happy now?" he yelled, hitting the door with the flat of his hand. "You happy? I lost everything. My job, my wife, my house. Even Leo. I can't even see my kid because I can't afford a place for him to sleep." He slid down the door, his voice cracking into a sob. "It's all your fault," he wept. "If you had just signed the papers, none of this would have happened. We would be fine. You're selfish. You're a selfish old woman." I listened to him cry. I listened to him blame me, blame the economy, blame Jennifer, blame the world. He was a man in his 40s, throwing a tantrum like a toddler who had been denied a toy. I closed my eyes, tears pricked at the corners, hot and stinging. I wanted to open the door. I wanted to pull him out of the rain, make him soup, and tell him we could start over. But I remembered the video. I remembered him practicing his fake tears in the mirror. I remembered the threat to erase me from my grandson's life. If I opened this door, I wouldn't be opening it to my son. I would be opening it to his addiction to easy money, to manipulation, to being rescued. "Richard," I said. My voice was low, but it carried through the door. He stopped sobbing for a second. "Mom? Let me in. Please. I have nowhere to go." "No," I said. "Why are you doing this to me?" he wailed. "You ruined my life." I took a deep breath. I let go of the deadbolt. I stepped back. "I didn't do anything, Richard," I said, speaking clearly so he wouldn't miss a word. "You ruined yourself." Silence. "Go home," I said, "or find one. But this house is not your safety net anymore." I heard him swear. I heard the bottle smash against the porch steps. Then I heard him stumble away into the dark. I stood in the hallway for a long time. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. It was the silence of a battlefield after the fighting stops, when you look around and realize that, even though you won, you still have to bury the dead. I looked around the foyer. I looked at the spot on the rug where he had tracked mud that first day. I looked at the kitchen where Jennifer had turned on the gas. I looked at the living room where Linda had insulted me. This house was paid for. It was beautiful. It was full of memories of Arthur. But now, it was also full of ghosts. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I saw the gas dial. Every time I sat in my chair, I saw the cruise brochure. The walls had absorbed the betrayal. The air felt heavy with the residue of their greed. I realized then that I couldn't stay, not because they forced me out, but because I couldn't heal here. This house was a monument to a past that was dead and a present that was tainted. The next morning, I called Joyce. "Is everything okay?" she asked, hearing the fatigue in my voice. "Did he come back?" "He came back," I said. "But he's gone." "Do you want me to call the police?" "No," I said. "I want you to call a realtor." There was a pause on the line. "Kimberly? Are you sure? You fought so hard for that house." I walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. The sun was out. It was a crisp, clear day. "I fought for my right to choose, Joyce," I said. "I fought to make sure they couldn't take it from me. But I don't want to live in a museum of bad memories." "I understand," she said softly. "I want to sell it," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "On my terms. At my price. And I want to use the money to build a life that doesn't include looking over my shoulder." I hung up the phone. I went to the closet and pulled out a suitcase. Not to pack for a nursing home. To pack for a hotel. I was going to stay at the Four Seasons downtown for a few days while the stagers prepped the house. I was going to order room service. I was going to sleep in a bed with high thread count sheets. I was done being the victim. I was done being the target. Richard was right about one thing. The house was just an asset. But he was wrong about the most important thing. My home wasn't this building. My home was me. Seattle looks different from the 15th floor. For 30 years, my view was a fence, a hydrangeas bush, and Mrs. Gable's porch. Now, through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my condo at the Meridian, I can see the entire city. I can see the ferries cutting white lines across the dark blue water of the Sound. I can see the Space Needle standing like a sentinel against the sky. It has been exactly 1 year since the trial. The old house sold in a week. It was a bidding war, actually. The developers tore it down, just as Richard had predicted. But I didn't stay to watch the demolition. I took the check, which was substantial, and I bought my freedom. This apartment is smaller, yes. 2 bedrooms, open concept, modern lines. But it has heated floors. It has a 24-hour concierge named David who knows my name and, more importantly, screens my visitors. No one gets up this elevator unless I press the button. There is no mud on my rugs. There is no fear in my hallways. I sat on my balcony, wrapping my cashmere shawl tighter against the morning breeze, sipping a cappuccino. I don't drink Earl Grey much anymore. I developed a taste for espresso in Rome. That was the irony that still made me smile. 2 months ago, I returned from Europe. I didn't go on a cruise ship where you are herd like cattle from port to port. I went with Martha Gable and 2 other ladies from my bridge club. We rented a villa in Tuscany. We drank wine that cost more than my old monthly grocery bill. We laughed until our sides ached. Linda had wanted that trip to validate her status. I took that trip to celebrate my survival. And the best part? I paid for every cent of it with my own card. No debt, no strings attached. Just the sweet, intoxicating flavor of solvency. I finished my coffee and went inside to my office. It was the second bedroom, converted into a workspace. On the desk, a small plaque read, "The Kimberly Vance Legal Defense Fund." It started small, just a donation to the local legal aid clinic. But with Joyce's help, it grew. We realized there was a gap in the system. The wealthy elderly, those who owned homes but had no cash, were often targeted because they didn't qualify for state aid but couldn't afford a private shark like Joyce. So, I became their shark, or rather, I paid for the sharks. My fund provides emergency legal grants for seniors facing financial abuse by family members. We freeze assets, we file injunctions. We stop the Richards and Jennifers of the world before they can sell the house. I sat down at my desk and opened the sleek silver laptop. I had emails to answer, a case in Tacoma, a grandmother whose grandson was draining her pension. I felt a surge of energy. I wasn't a retired victim, I was a CEO of justice. But amidst the stack of legal briefs, there was a physical envelope. It had arrived yesterday. I had left it on the corner of the desk, circling it like it might bite. The handwriting was familiar, though jagged, as if written in a hurry or by a hand that was tired. The return address was a P.O. box in Kent, a working-class suburb south of the city. I picked up the letter opener. My hands were steady. I sliced the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of lined notebook paper. "Dear Mom, I don't expect you to reply. I don't deserve a reply. I'm working at an Amazon fulfillment center now. It's hard work. My back hurts every day. I rent a room in a basement. It's funny. I used to complain that your house was too old, and now I live in a place with no windows. Leo asks about you. I told him you're traveling. I didn't want to tell him the truth yet. I'm ashamed, Mom. I'm so ashamed. Jennifer and I are finalizing the divorce. She's moved to Arizona. I'm alone. I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything. I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I lost the only person who actually loved me. Take care, Richard." I read it twice. A year ago, this letter would have broken me. I would have rushed to my car. I would have driven to Kent to rescue him, to buy him an apartment, to fix his back and his life. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I saw the remorse, yes. But I also saw the consequences. He was finally learning the lesson I should have taught him when he was 12. He was learning the value of a dollar earned by sweat. He was learning that actions have weight. If I stepped in now, I would interrupt his redemption. I folded the letter carefully. I didn't reach for a pen. I didn't pick up the phone. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. There was a small, lacquered box where I kept things that were precious but painful. I placed the letter inside and closed the drawer. "I forgive you, Richard," I whispered to the empty room. And I did. The anger was gone. The hate had evaporated in the Tuscan sun. But forgiveness didn't mean access. I could wish him well from afar without handing him the keys to my peace. I checked the time. 10 a.m. I had to get ready. I went to my bedroom and chose my outfit. A sharp tailored suit in royal blue, a color that made me look alive, vibrant. I applied my lipstick, checking my reflection. The lines were still there, but the heaviness around the eyes was gone. I looked like a woman who owned her own time. Today was a big day. The senior center downtown had invited me to speak, not about gardening, or knitting, or the good old days. They wanted me to talk about boundaries. They wanted me to tell my story. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. David, the concierge, looked up and smiled. "You look sharp today, Mrs. Vance. Big meeting?" "Something like that, David," I smiled back. "I'm going to give a warning." "A warning?" he asked, pressing the button to open the glass doors for me. "No," I corrected myself as I stepped out into the bright, crisp Seattle air. "A road map." The Uber was waiting. I slid into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The community center," I said. "And please, take the scenic route. I want to see the ocean." As the car merged into traffic, I watched the city pass by. I thought about the storm in my living room a year ago. I thought about the darkness of the hospital, and then I looked forward. The road ahead was open. The sun was shining. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't a passenger in someone else's vehicle. I was the one giving directions. The auditorium at the community center was warmer than I expected. The spotlight was bright, creating a cone of silence around the podium, making it difficult to see the faces in the back rows. But I knew they were there. I could hear the shifting of chairs, the polite coughing, the expectant hush of 200 people waiting for a story. I took a sip of water. I adjusted the microphone. My hands, once trembling with fear in a hospital room, were now steady resting on the wood. "Good evening," I said. My voice echoed slightly, magnified by the speakers. "My name is Kimberly Vance. And 1 year ago, my own son tried to erase me." A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the room. It is a taboo subject, even in 2025. We talk about drug abuse, we talk about crime, but we rarely talk about the war that happens inside the living room. "I am not here to ask for your pity," I continued, leaning in closer. "I am here to offer you a map, because some of you are walking the same road I did, and you don't even know you're approaching a cliff." I looked out at the audience. In the front row, I saw a woman dabbing her eyes. Beside her, a young man sat with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. "We mothers, we have a fatal flaw," I said softly, speaking as if I were sitting at a kitchen table with old friends. "We believe that love is a currency that buys loyalty. We think if we give enough, if we bake enough cookies, pay for enough colleges, cushion enough falls, that our children will naturally catch us when we stumble." I paused. But love is not a transaction, and biology is not a guarantee. I took a breath and delivered the first hard truth. To the parents in this room, do not give the keys to your life to anyone. Not even the child you birthed. We confuse support with submission. We think setting boundaries makes us bad mothers. But I am telling you, love without boundaries is just an invitation for abuse. Keep your name on the deed. Keep your signature on the check. You are not a burden for existing. You are a person with rights. I shifted my gaze to the back of the room, addressing the younger generation, the ones who might be thinking about inheritance rather than heritage. And to the children I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. To the sons and daughters who feel the world owes them a living, do not build your castle on your parents' tears. You might succeed for a moment. You might get the money. You might take the trip, but listen to me carefully. If the roots are rotten, the tree will fall. You cannot poison the soil that grew you and expect to blossom. The debt you create by crushing your parents is a debt that the universe will eventually come to collect. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. My son learned that lesson the hard way, I said. He chased a lifestyle he couldn't afford to impress people who didn't care about him. He learned that money belonging to someone else can buy luxury, but it can never buy respect. It certainly cannot buy self-worth. I thought of Richard's letter, locked away in my desk drawer. I thought of his basement room with no windows. And finally, I said, a word on who you let into your heart. When you choose a partner, do not look at their bank account. Do not look at their smile. Look at how they treat the people who wipe their nose. Look at how they speak to the waiter. Look at how they treat the vulnerable. Because one day, you will be the vulnerable one. And the person who encourages you to abandon your family for a profit will eventually abandon you for a better deal. I stepped back from the microphone. My legacy is not the house I sold, I concluded. It is not the trust fund I protected. My legacy is my dignity. I reclaimed it. And tonight, I hope you reclaim yours. Thank you. The applause didn't start instantly. It began with a few claps, slow and thoughtful, then swelled into a roar. People stood up. It wasn't the polite applause of a gala. It was the emotional release of people who had finally heard the truth spoken aloud. Later that night, the city was quiet. I returned to my condo at the Meridian. The hum of the city below was a gentle white noise. I kicked off my heels and walked into my home office. The desk was cluttered with files from the Legal Defense Fund. There were so many stories, so many Richards and Kimberlys out there. Tomorrow, I would meet with a new client, a retired teacher whose daughter was forging checks. We would fight for her. We would win. But for tonight, the work was done. I walked over to the desk lamp. It cast a warm golden pool of light over the polished wood. I reached out and clicked the switch. The room plunged into darkness, save for the ambient glow from the window. I walked to the balcony door and slid it open. The cool night air rushed in, smelling of rain and the sea. I stepped out onto the concrete ledge, wrapping my arms around myself. Below me, Seattle was a galaxy of lights. The ferries were moving specks of gold on the black water. The skyscrapers were pillars of ambition reaching for the clouds. Somewhere out there, amidst the millions of lights, Richard was sleeping. Somewhere else, Linda was likely spinning a new web. But up here, on the 15th floor, the air was clear. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of a life that was finally, truly mine. I wasn't lonely. I was solitary. And there is a world of difference. I looked at the horizon, where the city met the dark sky. A faint smile touched my lips. "Good night, Seattle," I whispered. I turned back inside, leaving the door open just a crack, letting the fresh air circulate through my home. A home built not on obligation, but on freedom. The story you just heard has had its names and locations changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone out there will pause and reflect. How many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? Honestly, I wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you speak up and fight to reclaim your voice? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story from Grandma's Secrets, or any feedback you have that could help us make our content even better. God always blesses the brave, and I truly believe courage leads us toward better days. For now, I'm leaving two of the most loved stories from our channel on the end screen. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next.